today's the day that we're gonna finally look at downtown Chicago, and specifically the river. We looked at Pilsen, we looked at Chinatown, we looked at the Ukrainian village, and now it's time to explore the center itself. There is no structure to how this vlog will be made other than, well, we walk down the river and see what we see. I wish I was one of those educated, people who knew all about the history of Chicago and its architecture and everything it has to offer, but I'm unfortunately not that kind of person, so I will let this text do it for you. We are right now on one of the famous maroon-colored bridges of the Chicago River, and we're in between Adams Street and Madison Street. I believe a lot of these are named after U.S. presidents. But this street, I actually don't know the name of. I'll have to check that in a bit. But here we have a monument for, and each border of a bridge contains some sort of little monument. I think there's one that's dedicated to the Chicago fire just down there. But basically, this is dedicated to the former mayor, William Hale Thompson. And then Charles R. Francis, Commissioner of Public Works. I guess this was all built in 1919, over 100 years ago now. Wow. And here we have this. They do have a graffiti and a little promotion for some cigarettes. But yeah. Whoa. Okay, that was way too close. Cheeky little pigeon. There's another monument down there that I might want to check out. So while we're strolling down, you see that tower? The one with the white spires on top? That is the famous Sears Tower, or Willis Tower, depending on what you want to call it. But regardless, it is the tallest skyscraper in all of Chicago. Pretty neat. They have a bank in there, they have some restaurants, typical fancy stuff. So there's a university over there, right in this white building next to the Sears Tower. The fact that it's literally right next to the Sears Tower is pretty insane to me. By the way, this bridge that we were on earlier is called Monroe Street, which kind of confirms my theory that they're all named after U.S. presidents. See, here's another monument by Adams Street. This is another little monument right by a bridge. So this is the next bridge. And this here, they have some really interesting embroidery on top of this little tower. And more importantly, it's a very big and popular nesting ground for pigeons. My absolute favorite. The guys that almost ran over me a minute ago. And this one is dedicated to Mayor Hale Thompson. So I guess, and it was built in 1927, so I guess some of these are a lot newer than others. That is an insane view. And this right here, the university I mentioned earlier, is the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Well, there's a lot of universities around here. As you can see over there by that monument, there are unfortunately a lot of beggars and homeless people in the downtown Chicago area. And as far as I can tell, it's only gotten worse since the pandemic. I mean, it's been like that for a lot of cities, including my home city of Los Angeles, but it's pretty prevalent here too in Chicago. There's a lot of them. I'm not going to go filming all of them. That would feel a little disrespectful, but I did want to at least point out a couple of them, just to give a more real picture of what Chicago is like. Here's something that I did not expect to see until just now. But this is the building for Union Station, a train station Chicago. Normally the train stations do not look fancy like this at all, so this is quite a shock. But they have a clock tower, they have these like Greek Roman pillars, and I mean, it looks like King's Cross. Like it looks like something you'd see in like Harry Potter or something. Now back to the architecture. So you can see that some of these buildings look very box-like. You know, they're very like, it's just like a cube, and it's very simple form, like this white building, for example, which is known as modernism. Building a building as efficiently as possible without doing a super complex design. And then over here, this taller, skinnier beige building with the little things on top, that is known as postmodernism, which has some similarities to modernism in the way that they build skyscrapers, the way that they design the windows, etc. But there is a different twist to it, in which they put more unique designs, typically at the top or at the side somewhere. And fun fact, there's another building over there, which I'll show more closely in a minute, but that center silver part of that black building is actually supposed to be a map of downtown Chicago, which is pretty impressive. So if you want to see the map, it's right there. And the red part right there, that's supposed to represent where we are right now. One thing you'll see a lot of during this river walk is a lot of banks and corporations. You can see a couple here, including for Coors and for Miller. So lots of drink companies. And then you can see, you know, several banks here, etc. One other thing that I know about this is that these types of buildings with a wide base and two columns on top with the gap in the middle, that is known as an armchair building, which is quite common in Chicago. And one of the most impressive examples of this, in my opinion, is the Lyric Opera House right here. This building right here, this giant ornate building. They apparently have a lot of shows here and a lot of, well, opera. They even have a show called Seduction, Love, and Betrayal, coming out March 11th. What a neat building. Up until this point, I've been mostly focusing on the more unique and impressive buildings in this area, but don't get me wrong, there's plenty of, you know, everyday stuff here as well. For example, there is a CVS right over here. Here's a CVS, and then, well, this kind of building you don't see every day. Here they have something called the Chicago Water Taxi, a type of water transportation that gets you from Michigan Avenue to the River Park, to the River Walk, and to Chinatown, as well as to Goose Island, which is a bit further north, as well as some other areas that are a bit more to the north. We've already done a couple vlogs in Chinatown at this point, but yeah. And just past the Opera Building is this building. So there are a few buildings around here, like this one with the silver pillars on the bottom, which have surprisingly small bases. And I believe that they use like water or like some sort of like substance to keep the bottom denser so that the top doesn't fall off, despite the small base. It looks unstable when you look at it at first glance, but it actually is very stable. The bottom part is just denser. You've got another beautiful little river monument over here. This right here is the most extreme example of something that I mentioned earlier, which is when the buildings have a really like fat, you know, top, and then the base is really thin. And I believe this one actually is supported by water in order to keep in order to help the bottom part stabilize the top part. So yeah, that is the most extreme example of that. And down there you have even more impressive skyscrapers. Here you get to see the drawbridge being raised up. Hooray! Wow, I got a solid 10 hands. Hello. That is impressive. There are certain areas around the river that are still under construction. Like this area, for example. Here, we've got a school here. And some rather odd-looking buildings, including this one, which, to me, looks like a corn on the cob. I don't have much to say about this building other than it's one of my personal favorites. I mean, look at this. Oh, look, it's another boat. Here we've got another riverside monument. Here we have 3 historical figures, and the one in the middle is George Washington himself. Pretty neat. And now we're going to end this vlog with 2 of the most famous buildings on the Chicago Riverwalk. The Wrigley Tower and the Trump Tower.